Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal, to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group. Connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 75 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where peer practitioners across our TA industry all get together and talk about various topics. It's a kind of a busy week, so I appreciate everybody for making time to attend the session. Today's topic, the do's and do nots on closing a candidate, something that we all do, hopefully on a daily basis, but something that we have to deal with all the time, from the small entry-level positions to VP positions. So with us today, we have Diane Karija. Did I get it right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Kathleen Winery or Winery?
Winery, good.
Winery. Gosh darn it, I was on a roll.
Okay.
Kara Schaefer. Oh, I'm sorry. Diane's out of Chicago. Kathleen's out of Portland. Kara Schaefer out of Los Angeles. And Mo Karimi. Did I get it right, Mo?
Close, Karimi.
Karimi. Oh, man. All right. Out of Minneapolis. So we got a Midwest, and myself, LA. We have a Midwest versus West Coast today in a very friendly conversation. So with that said, let me stop sharing the screen. And Diane, how about we have you start off the conversation?
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. One of my favorite topics. Just a little bit about me. I now run the talent acquisition team for a pharmaceutical and med device company called Fresenius Kabi in the Chicagoland area. We have manufacturing facilities across the country as well. But I have been kind of both sides. I've been on the corporate side, and I've also been in the agency, started my career in the agency world. And that's probably where I really got my closing technique started, is because that's like a sales job too, right? And I'll start with something I stole from my colleague at work, who said the closing starts with the opening. And you got to lay the groundwork. You got to do your discovery. You've got to, a good thing is to get the top three priorities. I always think that it's really about building a relationship. Mm-hmm. I also heard a speaker called Molly Fletcher. I don't know if you've ever heard her. She was at a SHRM conference, and she was the NBA. She was an agent for NBA players as well as Major League Baseball players. And she talked a lot about closing, and she talked a lot about relationship. And that's what laying the groundwork is, right? Really getting to know them, finding out what are they desires? Why do they want to leave? What's their why? Like, why are they talking to you? You know, I mean, they get a lot of outreach. They could have clicked on anything. Why are they talking to you? And a lot of times they don't even know that. So you have to really kind of, they may think it's this, but then you got to find out what's the gut, because that's what's going to get them to accept the job, is the gut and where they're at and what's unhappy. Where are they unhappy? Where are they dissatisfied right now? So finding their top three priorities, what they want, and you got to ask the compensation up front. And you ask early, ask often, as I say about comp, because you got to just keep closing that so that you can constantly be making sure you're in the right, especially if you're like us and we really have, everything's competitive, right? So you really we believe you ask that up front, and then you keep reminding them. Another key thing that I learned back in the day from Earl Nightingale, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was like Mr. Sales guy, right? And he says, get your person, your candidate to say yes as often as you can throughout the whole dialogue that you have with them. Keep getting them to say yes. So first you got to find out what you can feed them back to say yes to. What is it you want? You should explain the interview process, set the expectations, how you'll get back to them, what will happen, and you went with the time, the timing that you have for this job. You really want to, make sure that they understand that, and you're also being very transparent. That's really important as well. And then, of course, the follow-up, just after every action. Is there, if you set up a phone screen, follow up after. You set up another manager screen, you have to follow up with that. And then again, checking. So did you hear what you want? Oh, so you heard that. That's what you told me you wanted, right? And so, right? Yes, that's what I told you wanted. So this job has it. So again, that back and forth, and really getting to know them, building their story, know the characters in their life too. If it's a relocation, you have to talk to the partner or the spouse. Try the best that you can, because they are huge. If they're not on board, and I ask them, so, are they willing to move? When I ask them what they do, what kind of work do they do? Because I can tell, is it a job they can really move with? Now, this is going to change all with COVID, right? And everybody working remote, but still we're relocating, and that's really where things can fall apart for you, is in the relocation. Let's see. And when it gets time to the offer, again, setting those expectations, how you're going to send it, what method, is it going to be electronic? Is it going to be an offer letter? Setting the expectation for, like we have in our offer letter, when we want to hear back from them. And I ask them when they think they can get back to me, and I kind of push it and say, well, I don't like to let it go more than 48 hours, at least be enough to at least we connect again. Maybe they don't have an answer yet, but we connect again, because I got to see, why don't you have an answer yet? Because you should be closed already to say yes when I make that offer, if I did my job right? So you just got to keep, because something's falling apart if they haven't gotten, or there's questions, there's something not answered, right? And that you've got to get back. Those were my key points.
Dan, let me ask you like a literal question on that piece about asking what they're looking for. Are you getting into that in-depth conversation on what they're looking for at the point of on your first phone screen with them? Or are you waiting to kind of figure out, hey, I'm going to be moving forward with this individual before you go in depth on their wants and wishes? Like literally, where are you entering that in?
I'm asking them up front, because I'm saying, what are you targeting? You've got to have something in mind, just to make sure we're in the same ballpark before we waste everybody's time, yours and mine, if we're like way off. So I don't really, get too deep, but I want some kind of figure started, at least to move forward. And then I try to also get, if I can, just the components of the comp. Is it just a base? Is it bonus? Is it LTIP? Is it, what? And then also, you can tell the way they answer that question too, to the degree of importance that it is. Everybody says we don't switch jobs necessarily for money, but some people do. And if it's going to be a really big thing, the way they answer that will be telling as well.
Does anybody ever use, and this is probably a moot point given where we are now, commute as a selling point? Like if I know I'm decreasing somebody's commute, I'm kind of going to affirm that every time I would speak to that individual. Does commute ever play the part of your, hey, what are you looking for? Are you asking that question?
I'm not. I don't think that's one of the questions that you really should focus on, because I don't think it's actually a question that is maybe not kosher to ask people. You can't ask them where they live, for example, and how far their commute would be. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. But you do tell them your location and ask them if it's acceptable to them.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
I've actually learned that commute is one of the important factors in making a decision. I mean, there's different ways to look at it, right? You might have somebody whose job is in their backyard, not literally, but and that's going to play a big role for them. Or, I mean, Sean, you're in LA, correct?
Yeah.
And that's, depending on the market that you serve, I worked in Seattle for quite some time, and what looks like 14 miles and an easy drive for a Minnesotan is a hour and a half commute. So it can play a role. I mean, right now, maybe not with COVID, but I think it is still something that is important. And, hopefully if it's important to the candidate, they'll probably bring it up themselves.
Yes.
But yeah.
I'd agree too. Being a recruiter in LA, I get that question a lot. Specifically, our office is in Hollywood. Hollywood parking, for those who understand the LA area, there's not a lot of parking around at all. So I like to hit on some of our benefits that we do offer. We do offer benefits for cyclists or those that are taking rideshare to the office. We also have a shared parking structure that we have shuttles running to the office and back every 10 minutes. So those are things that I do bring up during those kind of last calls. And that's something that excites our candidates, just to know that they do have an easy way to get to the office when we are in the office.
Does it matter if we're talking about someone who's applied to our position versus us cold calling and outbound recruiting? That's where a lot of times why I would focus on that commute is if you didn't call me, I called you, I got to close you and your interest really quick. And I would just try and look them up on a map and say, can I save this person time? In 15, 20 minutes seemed to be a bit of a sell. Do we approach the active candidate differently than the candidates we're recruiting that we've done outbound recruiting for? Is there a different approach to closing them?
I personally would hope so. I mean, if someone's applying, right, in the ideal candidate, if they are actively on a search, they have done some research, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to expect the most out of every applicant, but, just given the fact that you could be on Indeed and click and apply all day long. However, I think in those circumstances, you could also maybe on the front end just acknowledge where you're, in the job advertisement where your office is located. So, I mean, if anything, it says a lot about the candidate if they haven't done that research on the front end.
I think you really have to watch the tempo, again, the rhythm of the conversation with a candidate you reached out to. If I just talked one yesterday and that went really long and he gave me a lot of information. So I could tell he was really interested. And so I even went to comp with him. But there's another one that, I was just bringing this up and he was just starting to think about it. Right. And so I was just like, why don't you think about this and come back to me? Because also I need him to jump through hoops. You need your candidate to go through hoops because they're going down the path with you. If they don't, it's red flags. It's saying there's something holding them back. They're not going here. Let's get it out so that we can either separate or move on.
That's great.
Diane, back to your list, right? Knowing what they're looking for, and this may come back from agency days too, is like sometimes you're not feeling a wreck, you're trying to find them a place to go search, so you got to know what they're looking for. Do you literally write down on a candidate, here's what this person said that to me they're looking for, and then and this is kind of what I did because I'd want to remember, right? So I'd go down that list of affirmation. Okay, here's what you told me you're looking for. Did we hit it? Are we not hitting it? Are we finding out? Do you go back to that list?
Absolutely. I take voracious notes. And I have an opening question that pretty much every candidate gets. And it's just first, I tell them about the company to get them interested and to be excited and, all the cool things we're doing. And then I ask them to tell me their career story and walk me through. And I get so much information and so much about them, right? Why did you make the choices? Why did you make the changes you made? How did you get to where you are? And why are you interested? And then we can talk about, are you really qualified, right? But because that's going to give me the whole fit thing and the whole, where they're at and where I need to go next, right?
I would agree. I mean, it's psychology at the end of the day, right? So you can have them list what's important or even rank, different job attributes, but also when you start to understand what motivated them to make their earlier career changes, and you can come up with a pattern, right? And we don't like surprises as recruiters. I think that's the number one thing. And so you have to pay attention to the small details, and to your point, note everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Big point. No surprises. Get them to know so well that you're not surprised at anything at the end. That's the key.
Excellent. Kathleen, how about we jump over to you and do your items?
Sure. I'm going to talk about both the do's and the don'ts, starting with the do's. I'm going to piggyback out a lot of what Diane said because it's all common sense. It's really important to get everything out up front that you can, find out their motivations. But for one thing for me, let me back up a little bit. I work with Viewpoint. We are a software technology firm. We create software specific to the construction industry. We're based here in Portland, Oregon, but we have offices in various places in the world. And I'm a technical recruiter, so I mostly hire the people for software development, project management, that type of thing. So always be closing is an old adage that I think all of us were taught at some point, especially if we were in this staffing agency world at some point. It's constant because you're selling. You are selling both the customer, you're selling the client, you're selling the candidate. So you really always have to be every single touch point that you have with the candidate. Go back to the basics on making sure the comp is still the same, making sure their motivations are still the same. You know, did they get a big raise or are they expecting a big raise? You've got to look into all those little things because you don't want those gotchas at the end, the surprise when they say, well, I just got a big promotion, so I'm going to pull myself out after you've made the offer. It's really
That's the toughest. I swear, if you could tell me how to deal with, that's the only one that always seems to come from left field is where they're really just looking for a promotion from their company.
And the only thing you can do at that point, you can tell them, well, your reasons for looking are still probably valid. Now that your manager knows that you were looking and that you maybe are close to an offer, now they're giving you what you were really looking for in the beginning. And you've got to think, how long is that going to be? Are they doing this just to keep you for now? Are those same reasons you were looking to leave? Are they still valid? I know many people that have regretted staying. I think most people regret staying once the company finally realizes their value and tries to make it up to them. It's just usually not a win for the candidate. You're the first person that they talk to at your company typically, and you're the one setting up the interviews. You're the one setting expectations for those interviews. So every touch point you have with them is a great time to ask additional questions, about their motivations, what their status is right now, because they're actively looking typically, and they might have come across something that they think, is just ideal for them more so than yours. So find out what's going on, make sure you know those. So again, there's no gotchas at the end. I make sure I touch base with the candidate at least once a week. If they've interviewed, I follow up with them after the interview or ask them to call me. If it's a really busy day, I ask them to call me right after. Just find out how they're feeling. Did the interview go well? Did they feel warm and fuzzies? Or did they, have questions based on how people reacted to them? Just a lot to go over with them. But again, you don't want surprises at the end. So that's that. And then as far as what you don't do, don't not respond to them. So don't ghost them. You really have to be engaged with them so that they feel warm about the whole opportunity with your company. Keep it simple though, focus on one area that they're really excited about and make sure that you stay with that topic throughout. And then at the end, if you're going to have a couple of top candidates, only one of them is going to get the offer. You're keeping the others warm because they could be secondary or possibly third candidates. So keep it simple if you have to give them bad news at the end. If they bombed an interview in several different ways and there was negative feedback, don't give it all to them. Just give them the one piece that they could easily fix and work on their own without, making them feel bad about the process. So that's another. Don't ignore flags with candidates. If they're not as engaged as you would like them to be, and if they forget what your company does as you're talking with them, if they forget who you are as a recruiter and what company you're with, those are huge flags. And they happen to us. And that's when you want to pull back a little bit, maybe let the hiring manager know, I don't think this person is it. And this is why, these are what I've noticed. But try to turn it around if you can. Just talk to the candidate and find out why they're not, showing you that they're super excited about the position. See what's going on. And then the last piece I would be just keep the candidates engaged as best you can. Send them articles about your company. Send them links to different sites that talk about your company, or videos, on YouTube about your company. Whatever you can to help them stay engaged.
Kathleen, and this is sort of for all the panels too, but to one of your points, Kathleen, the candidate's commitment, right? When they're going, again, pre-COVID, when people are coming in on site and, they're calling in sick or taking a vacation day from their current role, and they're taking the time to come in and they're committing that, they're just by definition is commitment on their end. There should be commitment on our end for sure, right? Mm-hmm. With all the video interviewing and the Zoom interviewing, now I'm not working a recruiter desk right now. I'm in operations, haven't worked one for quite some time. Is there an impact with all the Zoom or Skype or whatever type of video interviewing candidates do with companies now? Is it taken away from the commitment levels you feel from candidate, or are they not doing the research because they're not going in and meeting people face to face? Is there any alteration in recruiting as a whole around that candidate and actually the recruiter's commitment back to candidates with everything being Zoom?
That's a great question. I have not noticed it. In fact, we hired a lot of interns out of college that were so excited about being able to start with us. And we had to postpone their start dates by a few weeks to a month because of COVID. We weren't sure if we were going to have that level of engagement and commitment from them. And they shocked us. I mean, they were all so fantastic. And I think it's partly on your own company's processes. How engaged are you with them? How often do you check in? Do you have one-on-ones with them to keep that level of engagement and back and forth conversation going? But I'd be happy to hear what other people have to say about that.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think candidates, and I've been checking out the chat, there's a lot of conversation about this as well, but in COVID times, I feel like the opportunity candidates have to be having more conversations, to have more time to send those creative outreach messages to recruiters on LinkedIn, to those hiring managers on LinkedIn. I think that kind of gives candidates an opportunity not only to reach out for more interviews and more conversations, but really have time to do that research. Be watching, I'm from BuzzFeed, right? So be watching content, understand what our brands are doing, understand who our producers are, and who are you seeing in front of the camera? Who do you think you can connect with? Hey, I want to do that. I should talk to this person. Mm-hmm. So getting a little bit more creative. I think for me, as someone who was furloughed during COVID for a few months, I was on the other side of things, for a bit, where I was interviewing again, and I haven't interviewed in a while. And I'm kind of finding, as a recruiter, finding things that, maybe I wouldn't do this, or, when I go back to work, I want to make sure I avoid doing something like this. Case in point, ghosting. It still happens. It happens every day. So I think for candidates really looking for their next opportunity, you have the time. Think about how to be most creative with your outreach. Think about really who are those key companies? Who would you love to work with? What kind of career are you really looking to go down? And reach out to those people. I get probably 20 LinkedIn messages a day, and I respond to each and every one of them. It may not be that day, but I'm going to respond because that candidate took the extra time to figure out who they wanted to talk to. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to talk to them. Even if I don't have a job that's perfect for them right now, I could have that job in a month from now.
That's great.
Around always be closing, getting back to the Zoom thing. If we're faced with, hey, I can call this person or video chat, which way are we going if we're trying to close? Phone or video? I start
out with a phone always, just because I've been doing it for so many years that in fact, I actually am more of an audio person. So.
Is that true for everybody? You would go phone over video? Okay.
Yes.
Just don't leave it all over email.
No, I don't do anything of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has anybody, like, let's say you got somebody, like for me, going back to agency days, as soon as you got an interview, I'm calling that candidate first. I'd always call the candidate first over the manager, just personal preference. That was a long time ago before we had all these phones. Does anybody ever, so it was a crucial moment, right? I wanted to catch you as you're walking out of that interview. How did it go? Has anybody ever FaceTimed a candidate? Like, you know how you get the little chime? Has anybody ever FaceTime on their mobile device to a candidate?
I have
Like
not.
without warning?
Just pop in.
Oh, no.
I've never done it, but I was just curious
Yeah.
if anybody's ever done that. To me, again, I've never heard of anybody doing it, but to me, that's kind of like the ultimate. Hey, we're buds in this. I'm here for you. We're so close. I can FaceTime you.
I mean, maybe at some point in the dance, but not initially. How about you, Kathleen?
Never. I've never FaceTime a candidate. Once in a while I will do Zoom calls, especially if they're from affiliates with our company. So they're all on our instance of Google Hangout and Google Meet. But usually, I send them a calendar invite so they know to expect it and they're, prepared.
Yeah.
I usually send a quick text. I think we have a lot of systems that we use, and we do have one that allows us to text, and also like through Google Voice or what have you, you can text your candidates. At BuzzFeed, we have a lot of young candidates who go through the pipeline, so texting is the best way to communicate with them. I swear I get responses in seconds.
Yeah.
Does everybody have I don't think every ATS has this now, but the ATS with the built-in texting abilities, do you use those?
I would like one.
What's that?
I don't, but I would like one.
Same here. I don't either.
Yeah, a few of them are starting to build it in there or white label some texting service. I just think that's the way to go, especially at those late phases and what have you. So I challenge anybody to FaceTime a candidate and let me know how it goes. So I think that's where we're going to as a world, but we shall see. All right, Kara, let's jump over to you and your items.
Sure. Yeah, I think the piece I wanted to cover today is really the importance of that relationship that you build with your hiring manager up front. I think if you think about it, what's the key in relationships staying strong? It's trust. And if you can build that trust starting with your hiring manager, you guys can go after this search together. It's a partnership. Recruiting is important in that we know how to source and be strategic with how we find our candidates. But we want our hiring managers to be just as involved in the process. I always encourage our hiring managers and even the loop, the group that interviews our candidates, to reach out to the final candidates and make sure that they have answers to all the questions they may have. You're right. Coming to the end of the process and then losing your top candidate just due to another offer, it's not something you want as a recruiter. And the way to really avoid that is, as with everyone else on this panel, it's really checking in along the way with your candidates. In that first call, I think someone said in the chat earlier, I love just checking in, having them walk me through what is it that they're looking for in their next job. And then again, that's the way you can really, call out those flags. If I ask someone, what they're looking for, and they talk about, content that's just not aligned with anything we do, that's a red flag that they didn't do any research and watch our content before the interview. So I think that's one thing is, between yourself and your hiring manager, really tuning into what you hear these candidates saying, to pull out any red flags that may come up. And then also when you get towards the end of the process, we are competing with bigger studios. We're competing with the Netflixes of the world. And sometimes it's that final conversation where that candidate has an offer elsewhere and they have an offer with us. And, 9 times out of 10, it's money. And it's really talking to them and really communicating the benefit of their career choice at BuzzFeed and the opportunities they'll have to work along these incredible teams, to really make sure that the decision is based on what they're really looking for in their career, and not necessarily money based. And if it is, it's really the hiring manager explaining how much of an impact this candidate will have on the team, on the company as a whole. I think for me, that's always been my go-to when I'm looking for a new opportunity is where's the opportunity for me to grow? Where's the opportunity for me to learn? And that's way more important than money to me. And I think there's a lot of candidates that just need a little bit more communicating with the team to really know how it's going to be if they choose this job and they move forward and they join our teams, and really what that experience will be like for them. So bring trust into that, the candidate relationship as much as your relationship and the trust you have with your hiring managers.
Kara, looking at candidates kind of like post-interviewing, right? They've interviewed with the team and you're now following up with them. Are you, maybe this is just for even candidates that might be on the fence, are you CCing your manager or manager team with candidates in your follow-up, or are you kind of doing it, hey, I got this from here, I'll take from here, I'll call you if needed in regards to the hiring team? Or
I think it depends. I think ultimately it's really just myself and the candidate over email, but many times we'll be at that final stage and I'll just be like, hey, you know what? I think it would be great for you to just get on that final chat, one last chat with this hiring manager. We want you to make the right decision. We want ourselves to make the right decision. And really the only way to do that is to make sure you have all the information you need to make the right decision. So yeah, I might CC the manager if we're scheduling kind of an additional call, or if there's additional questions, looping in the manager to answer those questions. But I think, in many cases, I am thinking of two in particular from last year where we had candidates, they had competing offers. Those offers were, a bit more money than ours. And they ended up choosing our offer because of the opportunity that was presented to them by myself as the recruiter and the hiring manager and team.
Got it. Yeah, to me, it'd be like if I have a candidate that needs a little bit more TLC, give the manager the heads up, hey, I'm going to CC you on this email. I need you to respond. It's another, don't let it sit there for a day, because then it goes the opposite of TLC, right? Mm-hmm. That little one day ghosting, what have you. So on your last point about getting that candidate when you can't do it with money, or really about the benefits about the company or your industry. Again, going back to our situation in the world with COVID, with everybody working from home, and it's kind of, the work environment, not so much the case because we're all kind of digital working from home, or the great parking. Well, I don't need parking, I'm working from home. With so many people working from home, are we having to close in different ways that we did before because we don't have all the selling points? Like if we had a great location or great facilities, or, it's a 5-minute walk from the metro. If you live in LA, that's a big selling bonus. Are we faced with closing different ways than we were before?
We certainly don't have many, as we say, chits to sell. And it's harder. So you have to really, I think what Kara said is really great, getting the manager involved so that they can really sell the team, the work environment and the team, because that's really who they're going to be interfacing with the most, right? And the impact, I even wrote that down, the impact of the role on the team and on the company and on where they're going, the future.
You're selling the company culture as well, too. And if your company has a great culture and has managed to keep that culture during times of COVID, keeping people involved, like we have weekly all hands on deck meetings. We call it Viewpoint Voices. And we get employees involved. They can send in questions ahead of time. But our C-level executives or business unit leaders, they'll talk about what's happening within their departments. They'll highlight people that have gone above and beyond. And this is about a 45-minute session that's recorded every week that people, if they can't, participate or watch it, can go to later and review it. So I think things like that, and talking about how the manager's always available, or they're getting assigned a buddy, there's opportunity for mentorship. Those things really help cover the gap, when they can't be in the office and seeing everybody.
I would just to add to that, I would say, as recruiters, we're constantly having to step outside of our own, kind of situation and put ourselves in the shoes of a candidate, right? And I think that being, even in COVID, actually, if anything, more so during this time, they are thinking long-term. And so I would really kind of just have a conversation about what life looks like at this company once we return back to a normal, environment, right? Because I think that, if I were considering a new job, I'm not neglecting to think about that. If anything, I'm laser focused on what is that going to look like, because I think a lot of companies outside of a Zoom meeting or phone call, culture in a physical sense is always going to be different than how it is today through these phone calls and conversations. So I wouldn't neglect to really, let's say if you're new to the company, really just do your research and be able to speak to what that culture looks like and have a lot of thorough conversation about it.
When I was working in the Silicon Valley, I was used to judge companies on their employee cafeteria. That's how I would always sort of rate them. So Facebook makes it hard for everybody because they had this orange juice machine. I won't digress, but I fell in love with it. All right, Mo, I'll let you finish taking your drink, and then I'm going to sort of jump over to you if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, just to get started, I want to compliment a lot of what we've been talking about, right? And in terms of the relationship with hiring managers and how that can enable you to close a candidate, I think just from the very beginning, I do what's called a planned placement, right? And so I kind of say, okay, so you're looking for XYZ talent, right? And based on my previous experience running a search like this, it's probably going to take, maybe 2 weeks worth of recruiting efforts, a 2-week notice. So let's just throw something on the calendar for when we expect to at least have a decision made, and different steps in the process leading up to that on their calendar. And I say this mainly because with COVID right now, it's really interesting. I think that the behavior that I've experienced with candidates is that if they're not interested and if you're not perfect with communication or giving them feedback from hiring managers, it shows up in the sense of, let's say you might get ghosted or something. So if I know what's going on with a busy hiring manager that's really involved in a lot of other work, and I'm struggling to get feedback, which would typically open an opportunity for you to be in communication with a candidate, you don't want to leave them in the dark. So in lieu of saying, hey, no update yet, you could at least let them know that, hey, I think that this person's involved in XYZ, just give them something that they can connect with. So when I do a planned placement, oftentimes I run into a lot of issues with putting things on my hiring manager's calendar because of what they're occupied by, or they might, move something we had on the calendar because something else came up in it. If I can't give a candidate feedback or keep them in the loop, it does kind of help have a more, I think, human, or just something that they connect with and they don't feel like they're getting a lot of BS. Candidates also get red flags from recruiters oftentimes. So there's that. But then what I was going to kind of offer the conversation is really post final interview debrief, right? When you connect with your candidate and they just had their final interview and, let's say you probably have a good feeling that they're going to get an offer. I like to go back to salary. And let's say whether they gave you an exact dollar amount in the first conversation or a range, I think it's really insightful to say, okay, so at what point are you willing to accept without hesitation? Where are you going to have to think about it? And where is it an absolute no, right? And before I talk to the hiring manager, I like to go in with that information because, it's by the time I put an actual offer in front of that candidate, again, no surprises, right? I think it really helps. And now they've already actually had an opportunity to understand, okay, what am I going to be responsible for? What is this team like? How much of a hustle is this going to be? And that dollar amount really, sometimes it doesn't change, but oftentimes it does, right? So before a hiring manager, especially if you're going to let them close the candidate, I love the idea of showing up to that call or a conversation with the hiring manager, being able to say, I'm probably not going to accept that. Or if we could just do, bump it up a little bit, you have that candidate closed, case in point.
Mo, there's a Lori that sent a chat. She wanted you to repeat those 3 questions you asked the candidate.
Oh, yes. So it's what salary would you be willing to accept without hesitation? What salary would you have to, think about essentially? And where would you decline?
Those are great questions.
Yeah,
I like that approach.
I do too.
So Mo, so just to clarify then, let's say the interview is done. The first call you're making is to the candidate? Right?
Yeah, I actually usually instruct, especially being from the agency world, that I'm not working for the employer in this case. I like to tell someone, let's say pre-COVID, as soon as you get in your car, give me a call before you put your car in park or drive, unless you have Bluetooth. Not judging, but I like to talk to the candidate right away. especially with motivated hiring managers, they're probably going to get back to you pretty quickly. So, control is really important, I think, in this case. And even if your hiring managers might not expect that of you, they definitely appreciate that you gave them the resources they needed to get that candidate to say yes.
How about for the other panelists? Is your first call to candidates versus the hiring team?
Yes, the candidate, usually I ask them to call me because sometimes interviews go a little over and I want to hear from them as soon as they can. But the hiring teams typically have to debrief and it might take time to get all that information. So the manager typically doesn't have, they can tell you if they like the candidate, but they can't tell you, if it's a go or no go at that point.
Cara, Diane, are you guys first calls with the candidates or is it kind of situational?
Yeah, I would say for me, situational. How about you, Kara?
Yeah, I think situational for sure. I think for me, it's always, even if I don't have an update per se or final word, I'll at least still reach out to the candidate that day and just let them know, hey, the team enjoyed speaking with you. I'm going to connect with them in the next 2 days and I'll get back in touch with you by week's end. So at least there's that timing and at least it's not like oh no, now I'm in the waiting game again. When am I going to hear back? So always just checking in that day and then hopefully getting back in touch within 48 hours. Typically that's what we schedule for our debriefs is, within 2 days after the interview. And that way we get them feedback as soon as possible.
Has anybody ever said FaceTime me when you get out of the interview? I'm joking. I don't know why I'm so stuck on that, but I just think it's in my mind that's where we're going. Okay, I got to ask another Zoom question because I'm stuck on this. When you do a Zoom call with a candidate, do you ever turn your video off or are you always turning your video on?
Always on. I think it's rude to have somebody on and the other person not on, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I agree.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, to me, I guess the reason why I was asked that, to me, that does come back to the ABC, right? Always be closing. Kathleen, to your point, it's kind of rude if you don't. Yeah, to me, it's a sign of disrespect, especially if they have theirs on. It's like, without question, if theirs on, you need to turn yours on. So be prepared or what have you. All right. Let me ask you.
One thing that I didn't mention though, and I don't want to forget just because it's important, is opening up dialogue from the candidate. So when I do connect with the candidate right in the beginning, that first phone call, towards the end of the phone call, we'll talk about, okay, what can you expect in terms of feedback or updates from the process? But I also let them know, hey, the communication or the phone call I want to get from you or the email I'd like to get from you is when you advance in the process with other companies, whether you're internal or otherwise. I think it's, because if you have to push a hiring manager to free up their schedule so you don't miss out on talent, that information's gold, I think.
Are you getting it?
Am I getting the information?
Yeah, the candidates.
Yeah, honestly, it's key. We've been talking about relationship building throughout this entire Zoom, and so it does require that. I think when you've shown an interest not only for the employer that you're representing, but also for the candidate, they would. Yeah, or if they're just simply very interested in the job, they would most certainly communicate that. Otherwise, it might say something about their communication, I guess.
I think it's a trust factor there, right? If you have the candidate's trust, you'll get it. If they don't necessarily trust you, they're probably not going to give it, in my opinion.
Well, you would tell them what you do with that information for sure. You want to make sure you let them know why you're asking, right? And I use hypothetical situations. I would say, I want to keep everything in a close timeline for you. I would hate for you to really love this opportunity, but have an offer that's going to, maybe expire in 48 hours. I've even gotten to a point where I've actually challenged candidates to work with the other company to give them time, just because it's unrealistic for us to be able to get to that offer stage, within a 48-hour period. So, but it starts with being transparent about how you use that and letting them know it's for them and not for us, right?
So sort of tuning in on that, the word relationship, right? I think this is what a lot of it comes down to, is building that respect and relationship. I always thought, and this is going back to agency days when you're in the pit or what have you, I always thought the best recruiter in the room was the one taking the most calls, not making the most calls, because that kind of signified that commitment that they were getting from candidates. Just personal thought. Question for the panel. We talked about offer declines, right? You've been doing all this for closing. You got to that point, you get an offer decline. Let's say they take that offer. You kind of get the vibe that, hey, they're trying to work themselves into a raise. I get it. Everybody wants to make more money. For those people that did that, let's say 2 months later, they call back and say, hey, I'm interested now. And they're no longer at the company. Are we taking their call? Are we moving forward with them?
Hiring managers would say no. But if I got it past the hiring manager, I would say yes, because I know how it is out there. But
would you leave that decision to the manager? Would you go back to the manager and say, hey, remember this person, we had an issue. They declined our offer. They're interested again. Are we putting it on the manager's plate?
offer
I
them
would actually try to bring it up with the candidate. Say, this is what happened last time. How can we be assured nothing similar is going to happen this time? What's changed?
What changed? Yeah.
Get them to commit.
Not me. I hated that so bad. You get to that point and they decline. They take a counter offer when you got everything that they were asking for. Oh, that just hit me so hard. I didn't ever want to work with them again.
I think it's situational. Someone in the comments just said something about engineering managers, right? And a lot of software engineers do look at what they accomplish as project-based, and they're kind of offering a value add that's specific to their accomplishments, unless it's a position where they're heavy in maintenance work. But I think depending on the market, or the reasoning, if someone has 5 years with a company and they have really good job stability, and they chose to stick with that employer but came across something or had to learn for themselves, because working in the agency side, we often recommend people not to take counter offers because there's statistics behind that, but people are still human at the end of the day. So depending on what you do, or maybe the personality of that hiring manager could be tough, but I would not necessarily hesitate to jump back into engaging that candidate.
And how good were they too, how bad do you need them?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like it happened a lot, but a few times it did. It was just like, oh, that hurts so bad. Cause to call a candidate back with, hey, we're good. We got it's yours. And then they'll say, oh, I'm no longer interested. What? Anyways. So another quick question. Sorry, still around closing. Are we all full life cycle recruiters for the most part? And this may be just the technology developer world. I won't name names because I don't know if the person who told me this is okay with it, but they were at a company. They ran their director of recruiting for engineering at a high tech company, Silicon Valley. The reason why I ask for all full life cycle is they have recruiters dedicated to just closing. There's around their engineers and developers, and the recruiters would get them to that point where now it's because it came down to it's about money and bennies, really money for the most part. So they had recruiters that all they did was close. That's all throughout the day. I had never heard of that before, where that's all you did all day. Has anybody heard of that?
Only when you buy a car.
It's the same premise.
Buy a car.
Yeah. But has anybody ever seen that before? No. Yeah, me neither. That was the first time.
I would have to think that company has a lot to play with too. We don't have that much to play with. They probably they can craft a deal any way they want.
Right.
And someone in the comments just mentioned Amazon, which is true. They have people that just do the sourcing. They set up interviews. I mean, they're more like a sales development rep, right? If you were in a sales environment, it's not unlikely, but I think, it would really depend on
it wasn't Amazon, but it was a company that kind of type, where it was like a unique unicorn from the company perspective. All right. Hey, we've gone a little bit over a half hour there. Any final closing comments? I think the ability to close and continue that from start to finish is a sign of a good experienced recruiter, in that they work that all the way through. Any final thoughts or comments around closing in corporate recruiting?
I think the thing I wanted to add is just, thinking about how, bad news, good news, it all travels fast. Street cred's important for your company. And I think the way that you approach your process speaks highly of, if you're doing it the right way, the correct way, speaks very highly of your company as a whole. And that news is going to travel. So you may not think about it, but you may be getting more candidates in your process because they're like, oh, well, I heard my friend had a great experience, interviewing over at X company. So I think that's also something to consider too, is just keep thinking about your process, make sure it's one you're happy with, make sure it's one that if you were the candidate, you'd be happy in that process, and that news will travel.
I agree. You would be surprised the impact interviewing has on an employer brand 100%. And I don't care if you work in LA, New York, or Minneapolis, job markets are smaller than you think. And one bad experience can be have a negative impact.
You see it all over that's what I always see is in the comments on the social media. They talk about the interviewing process a lot. So it obviously makes a difference, One thing I wanted to ask real quick, I know we're leaving, but I really am trying to break my company of it. They want to have 20 million interviews, and that's another bad thing. We get a bad rap about that. I was there all day. I interviewed, 7 people, and that's, and I think that's ridiculous too. Do you guys try to pare that down?
I've actually gotten feedback most recently from a C-level executive that they were uncomfortable, that they were ready to make an offer after having only interviewed 2 people. But I let them know that in my approach to recruiting, I might talk to the same amount of people as someone that likes to sling mud at the wall. That's not necessarily what's different, but at the end of the day, I like to shortlist 1 or 2. And that's why I need all the information on the front end. And my goal is to, just be an asset. I want to be another you right out here recruiting for these jobs. So I think it's something you have to work, and it's almost like a change management thing, right? You have to kind of get them to agree to your process.
If you're getting a negative review on Glassdoor, Diane, are you highlighting that to them?
Yes. I try, but we have to have all these people interview them because, they're necessary. And I argue it, but it's not, I'm not getting too far. So I got to do better.
I don't know if there's a silver bullet out there for you. This might be one of those things. All right. Go ahead.
Netflix had a really good, I did a webinar from Netflix once, and they had it really down, which I thought was, especially for a big company, they had interview teams that, they were skilled in interviews. They were skilled in they were skilled in the company. They were skilled in communicating about the company, and they did a lot of the interviews. And then you would bring in maybe the functional people to talk about the specific function, but they had it streamlined, really, really nifty.
My apologies. I think I misunderstood the topic. I thought we were
That's
talking
okay.
about the number of people interviewing.
Your issue was a problem too on the other side. So they're both
issues, right?
Yep. So it was fine.
Bye.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, everybody else. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.